quadratic formula. Now, that is a way to find the x-intercepts. We've already done factoring, where we used the box method. That was one way to find x-intercepts. We did the square roots, where we simplify the square roots. That was another way. Quadratic formula works all the time, no matter what. But it can be a little messy, can be a little ugly, so that's why I showed you those other methods that usually are better in most cases. But if everything else fails, quadratic formula works. So here is that formula. X equals. Now we're going to have a big fraction. Now on top of the fraction is negative b. The b is always in parentheses, and there's always a negative outside of it. And then we have the plus or minus symbol, which I will explain in a bit. The square root of b squared minus 4ac. And on the bottom of the fraction is 2a. So, right? It is a lot of numbers to type in, but all you have to do is type them in. You don't have to calculate anything. I am making this so, now a lot of the quadratic formula problems we typically would do, you would have to simplify a square root. Some you might even get some imaginary numbers, but I took all of those out, so you don't have to do that. I am letting you do all of these in the calculator. Okay, so there's two places where we fill in the A. There's two places where we fill in the B. Place where we fill in the C. Look at what's under the square root symbol. Do you recognize that?
Yeah.
Where have you seen that?
That's the same formula as what we
It's a formula we just did. That's the formula for the discriminant.
Yeah.
What about negative b over 2a? Have you seen that before? We seen that early on when we were finding the vertex. So every part of the quadratic formula we've done in some capacity before. It's just all put together. Okay. So let's look at number 1. What is A? 5. What is B? And what is C? Negative 26. Very good. So I'm going to plug the 5 in to both of these A's, the negative 3 in the B spot, and the negative 26 in the C. So the toughest part is just making sure that you don't miss a negative or something, because that can throw your answer way off. So there's a negative, and then in parentheses I put my B, which is also negative 3. I will tell you that when we get to it. Plus or minus. I expect you to write this out. I do not want to see just an answer on your paper.
Do you have to write it out every time?
Yes. And then we have the square root. And then in parentheses, I do my b again, which is negative 3. But this time it has a squared. Notice the first time I wrote it, there was not a squared. Minus 4. And then my a, which is 5. And my c, which is negative 26. And then on the bottom is 2 times my a, which is 5.
How do you type the plus or minus in
I will tell you in just a minute. Alright, so get it wrote down. You have to write it out. So now in your calculator,
I see you doing this one.
alright, so go to alpha y equals and type in negative, and then in parentheses we're going to put negative 3. There's not a button that does both plus and minus. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the plus first, and then we'll go back and change it to a minus. We don't have to, I'll show you how you don't have to retype it in every time. Okay? But you can only do a plus and a minus one at a time. So I'm going to do a plus square root. Square root is second, and then you hit the x squared button. Notice it has a square root symbol above it in blue. Okay. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put negative 3 with a squared. That squared is always outside of those parentheses. Minus 4. And then my 5 in parentheses, and then my negative 26. Now notice this square root symbol, I never went outside of it. That line should extend all the way across at the top. If you arrow over too much, you'll be typing outside of it. And then on the bottom, 2 times 5. So check to make sure that what you've typed in is what I've typed in. And you should get 13 over 5. Now, to keep from having to go back and retype it in, if you arrow up and highlight that and hit enter, it brings it back down.
Let's go.
Okay, and then all you got to do is arrow over until you're on top of the plus sign. And you don't have to delete it, just hit the minus and it overrides the plus. So we did it once with the plus, once with the minus.
Teachers, pardon this interruption.
Alright, so I did the 13 over 5, and then I changed it to a minus, and I got x equals negative 2. That's all we have to do for each problem. That's it. Okay. So let's go to number 6. What is A?
6.
Oh, number 2. No. I was looking at A and said 6. B is what? Negative 5. And C is negative 1. So we have negative, and then in parentheses we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of my b, which is negative 5, and then squared, minus 4, and then my a is 6, and my c is negative 1. And then 2 times the A, which is 6. Does anybody need a further explanation on how I'm just getting what I've wrote so far?
Nope.
You have to follow this formula exactly. Yes.
The first one, where'd you get the negative 2?
On the first one right here,
Yeah.
the answer. So when I went back and I highlighted this, it brought it back down. I changed the plus sign to a minus sign.
Oh, okay.
Because we have to do it once with the plus. That's what this plus or minus is. Once with the plus, once with the minus. Hold on. So it brings it back, so you don't have to retype everything. And then use your arrow keys.
Is the X just 1?
To move it to where the cursor is over top of the plus, and just type in a minus.
I have a question.
Mhm.
How did I get this?
I'll have to look. Alright, so number 2, I haven't typed this one in yet. Negative, and then in parentheses is negative 5 plus the square root, and then in parentheses I have my negative 5 again, squared, minus 4 times 6 times negative 1 all over 2 times 6. And I get x equals 1. Okay, and then when I go back up,
Yeah, that's what I remember.
and change it to a minus, I get negative 1 over 6.
Okay. What did I do?
I got like everything.
Alright, let's go to number 3. What's A?
3.
3. What's B? 1. And what's C? Negative 10. Alright, so x equals, we have a fraction, negative 1 plus or minus, oh, forgot to make that blue, the square root, and then in parentheses we have our b, which is 1 squared, minus 4, and then a, which is 3, and c, which is negative 10. And all over 2 times a, which is 3.
See if I set this one as right.
So double check to make sure what you wrote's what I wrote. And you've got to be very cautious when you type it in the calculator. You have to type it in exact. Can't miss anything.
I got the minus in front of me.
This is the one lesson that I did Monday morning that you teach.
So it's negative and then 1 plus square root 1 squared minus 4 times 3
I got a decimal.
negative 10. You can get a decimal. That's okay.
A really big one.
That's, yeah, you can get decimals.
1.659.
Sure. You can get decimals.
Ah,
But I did not get a decimal on this one. But some of these we do, you will. So double check. Make sure you have the squared. Make sure you have the negative.
Is that minus 4 or negative 4?
It's a minus. So on the board I've showed you what needs to be negative and what needs to be minus. So you get 5/3. And then if I highlight and go back and change, to a minus. Okay. We get x equals -2.
I got that one 3 now.
Good. Yep. So it's real easy. It won't give you an error probably. I mean, not always. If you put a negative there instead of a minus. So be careful. Right. Number 4.
And then you can get like the next one's -2.
Yep. When you change it to a minus, you get -2.
Got it.
All right. So A equals
6.
A is 6. Okay. B is 0. We do not have a plain X, right? So your B is 0.
So
What is C? -54. If you don't have a plain X, you don't have a B. If you don't have a plain number, you don't have a C. So it's -0. Don't try to make any shortcuts and try to just skip out typing in something. Just write it all. Plus or minus the square root b, which is 0, squared, minus 4, and then my a, which is 6, and my c, which is -54. And then on the bottom is 2 times a, which is 6.
-3.
Type it in.
Is that right?
I haven't done it yet.
Oh, for the negative is -3. Or for the subtract. Negative positive, then I'll do positive. Yeah, positive is 3 and the subtract is -3.
So there's something wrong again.
So when I type that in with the plus, I do get a +3. And when I go change it, oops. No, I did the plus first. It doesn't really matter which one you do first. You don't have to list them in a certain order. We get -3. Good. Any questions?
Well, what was the other one from there?
3 and -3. Okay. All right, number 5. Let's do A is 3. What's B?
-3.
And C is -1. Good. All right, so I filled that into the formula. Okay. So type it in. And you should get a decimal on this one. 1.26, is that what you all got?
Yep.
Yep. Now here's the thing. I'm going to hear you say, do we have to round? Yes. Rounding is not something we just do when we're asked to do it. Unless you're going to write out that whole answer, those rounding rules always apply. So if you're going to, like, typically I would want you to do, like 2 decimal places would be fine. So let me write down up here. This is 1.26376. If we're going to do the second decimal place, you always look 1 to the right. If that number is 5 or more, I would make this 6 a 7. Otherwise, I leave it. So am I going to leave it as a 6?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it as a 6. Now, what if I said, I want you to go to 3 decimal places? So I'm going to look at this third one and then check the one after that. Would I make this 3 a 4?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it was 3 decimal places, it would be 1.264. 2 decimal places is just 1.26. You always, no matter what, that's always the rule. And when you learn that, it's not just something you do when your lesson is about rounding. Okay. So you get 1.26, and then go over here and change it to a minus. And we get x equals negative 0.26. Did you get a negative and then a positive? So you missed a negative somewhere. Okay. Let's do number 6 together, and then I'm going to have you work on the last 2 by yourself. So A is 3. B is 2. Yep, and C is negative 4. So I'm just filling into the formula.
Is 6 the best answer?
Probably.
I hate this formula.
It's not that hard, it's pretty easy.
No, it's easy, but I hate typing it.
It is a lot to type in, and you have to be careful.
Decimal again?
Yep, we got a decimal again. So if we go to 2 decimal places, if you don't have it yet, look up here. It would be 0.8 what? 7. Yep, because the 6, the number after the 6 is bigger than 5, or it's at least 5. So it's 0.87, and then go up here.
Stop breaking so I can write it. Just trying to write the word.
So we change it to a minus, and we get negative 1.554. After the 3 is the 5. 5 or more, you add 1 more. So I want you to do number 7 and 8 by yourself.
I'm almost done there.
Gave me an error, and then it said syntax. If that's the case, go down to the second option where it says go to. That's going to show you where you messed up. You don't have to retype it in. It put its cursor right there, which if it's on like a minus or a negative, that tells me that I typed the wrong thing in. So here, I actually typed a minus instead of a negative, and then I can change it. So if you get a syntax error, that usually just has something like you put the wrong sign or something in, or an extra 1 or something weird, okay? But here are your answers for 7 and 8. I expect you, when you do your practice, I expect to see this work written out. You will not get credit if you don't show your work.
I got that, but then I got a decimal or something. The later start.
Stuff's a lot more easy.
So your answers are 1.39 and negative 0.72 for number 7. And then number 8, 3.24 and negative 1.24. Yes.